Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I think there is a need to rehash and re-look at what the requirements are for drip trays per se. What the standards say about drip trays. When do I need to install a drip tray? What must it look like? How must it be? And then we'll look at some common problems as well. Okay, so the standard that we're looking at is SANS 10254. So SANS 10254 says to us that we need drip trays. And what does it say about drip trays? So it says in 5.1 of SANS 10254, it says construction, it says when a storage heater complete with its ancillary components is installed in a manner and position where any leakage from the storage water heater or its valves and components, so any leakage from the heater or the valves, if that can cause damage to property in any manner, it shall be furnished with a drip tray that complies to SANS 1848. So it says, very important to note here, guys, it doesn't say every single geyser must have a drip tray. It doesn't say that. It says when leakage from a geyser is going to cause damage, then you shall install a drip tray, which means that it is a subjective decision. It is a subjective decision that you as an installer must take. Ask yourself the question whether or not it's going to cause damage to property when it leaks. If the answer to that question is yes, then you require a drip tray. So there's a couple of examples where there are no drip trays that clearly would require drip trays. In a cupboard above a kitchen on the right-hand side, that's a horrific installation, by the way. And then, of course, yeah, there you can see. So the point is that it is a subjective decision to be made by the installer. There's no hard and fast rule, for example, that says you must or must not install a drip tray when a geyser is installed in a garage, because some garages will have sloped floors that slope all the way, straight outside and nothing underneath, and it will be perfectly safe to have that thing leak on the floor. It carries on. It says the size of the drip tray shall be such that it will cover the total area of the heater and the associated appurtenances, which just means valves, etc. So whatever the valves are, whatever appurtenances, whatever attachments that you are wanting to attach to the geyser in a normal installation, that'll be a PIRB, vacuum breakers, shutoff, TP, etc. Sometimes in a solar, you're looking at pumps, you're looking at non-return valves, you're looking at mixing valves, etc. Okay, this means that all of that stuff must fit over the tray. So here's a couple of examples of issues. Some of them very obvious, some of them quite common, like the one on the left, where you've got a metallic foot. We're all familiar with the scenario. You've got a foot cutting into that ridge in the plastic tray, and 6 out of 10 of them might not get damaged, but the other 4 will. So you've got the danger, the risk factor is high, whereby that tray could become damaged, especially when you don't get the timber supports underneath the tray corresponding it nicely to that foot. So we've seen it in the past where the timber support is slightly off center, and that foot, together with that foot, it's almost creating like a scissor effect, and it slices through that tray. So that's it's a bit of a red flag when we see that. And then these other pictures, you can see it doesn't need explanation. So, I mean, when you've got a drip tray to try and serve a purpose of containment, and you cut it away, and you'll see in a couple of pictures time an even worse example of that. But obviously, guys, this is not, this defeats the purpose of having a drip tray completely. There's no point in the drip tray. And then just to show that it will be, can be catastrophic if enough water is allowed to leak onto a ceiling, it can be catastrophic. Now, here's a couple of nice examples of not only homemade drip trays, but modified drip trays. By the way, if anybody wants a, if you can't afford a geyser and you've got an old gas bottle, just take a couple of screenshots here, and there we go. This is the way to create a geyser from nothing. And there we go. You've got a lacquer geyser there, a drain cock, put an element and a thermostat in there, and Bob's your uncle. No, but in all seriousness, guys, this is about drip trays. And I mean, have a look at that, because he installed it at a cupboard. And there's simply, it's just, I mean, what's the use? What is the use? Okay, some more examples. These are more recent than I took personally. Drip trays being supported in a ceiling space with one button. That's for sure. It was a couple of months ago I took these pictures. The overflow has got a backfill. It is the wrong material, and it simply is not adequate. It will not fulfill the function. And we're going to get into what the expected performance of a drip tray is supposed to be in a minute. Well, the next slide actually. But I mean, you can see here, this is a 150 litre geyser being supported by one 38 by 38 batten across trusses that are, I don't know, I didn't measure them, but probably 760 or 800 mil apart. So that's simply, that's almost criminal. Okay. This, by the way, was above an ensuite bathroom. It was a lady that was in her 70s, living alone in a flatlet, and this was done, I think, about a month before I did this audit. So it was a brand new, well, I call it brand new, but it was a replacement. In other words, it was a recent job done by a certified plumber, and there we go. Okay, enough on that. What do they tell us about the installation and the performance of drip trays? So let's have a look at what 10254 carries on to say. It says the discharge pipe shall be sized, laid out and supported to comply with SANS 10252-1 and 0252-2. So what does that mean? So 0252, as we know, is the drainage installation for buildings. And so that is talks to us about the materials, types of materials that can be used. It talks to us about gradients, although gradient is mentioned in 10254, as we'll see in a minute. But it talks about materials, it talks about support, etc. So 10252, particularly about support, says that if you use 50 millimeter PVC, your maximum centers between the supports may be 1 meter. And if you use 40 millimeter PVC, those maximum centers become 600 mil. Minimum changes of direction, they don't say you may only use 1 or 2. It says, you know, you as the designer, please ensure that there are minimum changes, that there aren't unnecessary changes in direction. It then says that the sizing, gradient, and length of the discharge pipe shall be calculated for a flow rate of at least 40 liters a minute and shall be installed at a gradient of at least at 1 in 100. So 40 liters a minute and 1 in 100. Those are the two pieces of information that they give us. They don't give us anything else. They don't say to us, it must be 50, it may not have more than 2 bends, and it's got to be less than 3 meters. That doesn't say that. It says you've got to make sure that it can discharge at 40 liters per minute and that it has a gradient of at least 1 in 100. So if it's more, that's great, but it cannot be less. So those are the two criteria that SANS 10254 gives us in terms of the installation of drip trays. Right, so we know that it must be a proper type of pipe because we have to comply with SANS 10252. If you look at 10252, it gives you examples of types of drainage pipes that can be used, most of which are actually not suitable for drip tray overflows, because I mean, who's going to put a copper pipe or a galvanized mild steel pipe there, etc. So they talk about those different types of pipes. They do talk about HDPE, but the HDPE, it's not the LDPE, it's not the low density polyethylene, it's the high density polyethylene that is an acceptable material for drainage, but it's very it has different behavioral characteristics, and it's got this thing that it sags under its own weight over time. So the support requirements for HDPE are I suppose a little bit stricter than something like PVC. You can see that picture on the right hand side. Everything else on the installation probably complies, but except for the fact that it's not supported. It's probably got a fall only just, but it's not supported. The flow will be okay, but so that is non-compliant. That the tray, that it must be supported correctly as per SANS 10252/1, as you can see there. That the tray must be big enough for the geyser and all of the valves. The tray must be sloped towards the outlet. The discharge from the tray must be outside and visible, so that I can tell whether or not the thing is dripping or leaking. Or if there's something leaking into my tray, it doesn't disappear out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And that the tray must be correctly supported with the correct timber, etc. So it must be able to bear the weight of the geyser, but it must also support the tray and keep the tray flat and unbuckled and sloped towards the outlet. Okay. So concerning the flow rate, now this is a little experiment that I did a couple of months ago, that just to satisfy my own curiosity regarding what type of pipe configuration would best be suited to allow for 40 liters a minute flow rate from a drip tray, because that's the requirement. So yes, we know that that's the requirement, but how do you kind of determine that at a glance? You know what I mean? So how do I, as an auditor, look at an installation and say, well, I doubt whether that will do it, or I look at it and I say, oh yeah, that'll do it. What do I base that on? So I did a little experiment whereby I took a drip tray, and I'm not going to show you everything, but I basically put a whole host of different piping configurations, diameters, lengths, falls, bends, all kinds of stuff on this tray, and I fed it with 40 liters a minute. Now, I want to tell you that 40 liters a minute is quite a lot of water. I've got a relatively old home in the Tableview area. I've got a 1/2-inch copper main supply from the council, and then the rest is 22 all around. But even from one tap, I couldn't reproduce 40 liters a minute. So I had to switch on my well point pump as well and throttle down until I got 40 liters a minute with 2 hose pipes running into the drip tray, which was 40 liters a minute. And then I could start to do these experiments. Okay, so what I found was quite interesting. So here's just a plain outlet. So without any even pipe attached to the thing. Now, 40 liters coming in to the tray. Have a look at the level of that water. It is almost overflowing. It is not a happy tray. It wants to, it's handling it, but it is almost overflowing. Okay, and then it's got no outlet pipe, nothing. It's just the fitting. By the way, there's another picture of that fitting not even in the tray, and it's doing exactly the same thing. So just the tray with its outlet, it's doing exactly the same thing. So if you have a look at a 40 mil pipe with one bend, it's got good fall. You can see that fall on the top right-hand side there. It falls straight away from the drip tray and off it goes. And it easily discharged the 40 liters a minute. So there's 40 mil pipe with a 90-degree bend. And what is it, about 3.5 meters long. But it's got a good fall and it goes like a bomb. It actually creates a little bit of a Venturi effect. Here's another 40 millimeter pipe installation with multiple bends, all different sort of convoluted routing. You can see I MacGyvered a proper fall there, wedged it with various things. The point is that there's a fall from the beginning all the way to the end. No matter there's 345-degree bends and a 90-degree bend there, and off it goes. It's got a fall, it drains that water, no problem. And so we go. So the point that I made there is that for me, the takeaway from that was the critical factor is a fall. You've got to have a fall in a drip tray pipe from not only the drip tray itself must be falling, sloped towards the outlet, but then the pipe from there must fall immediately. I found that if you even have a 50 millimeter or 100 millimeter piece of pipe straight out of the tray, level or slightly back falling, it shoots the whole thing down. So nothing then works and it overflows. It just completely overflows. Even if the rest of that pipe has a fall, it doesn't matter. That initial non-falling piece of pipe will shut that down. So the fall must be sufficient and constant. Lift the tray enough to create a fall. What I mean by that is, how many times have you and I, and we've all seen where a geyser gets replaced and you don't necessarily look at the height, the relative height of the geyser drip tray versus where its outlet must be. So if the outlet, if there's the eave over there, I know that that's my invert level of the outlet over there. I need to ensure that I lift the tray high enough so that I can create that fall. We've all seen installations where the tray is simply put back on a support structure that was there, with the result that the tray overflow pipe is now level. And I want to tell you that's not going to work at 40 liters a minute. Having said that, yes, we understand that 40 liters a minute is unrealistic in terms of real world behavior. How many times is a tray going to receive 40 liters a minute from a leaking geyser? I agree with you, probably 1% of the time, if that. But that's not the point. The point is that the standards require it, and if that's what they require, that's what it must be. That's what we must look at. So the argument of yes, but this geyser did burst and it wasn't running at 40 and it did discharge. That argument, when we're saying does it comply to the standards or not, that argument doesn't come into play. So it's got to be what the standard says or nothing. Then otherwise we must throw the standard away. So lift the tray. Make sure that when you replace a geyser, do the due diligence. Lift the tray up enough so that you can create a fall for that drip tray overflow, and then support it correctly. Often we see good installations, proper falls, nice routing, everything, but it's not supported. It's not supported, and it's flapping around. And over time, it's going to start to sag and create bellies. And another thing I found in that experiment, where I had a very good fall, everything perfect, but one belly in the pipe, and I put it there deliberately, it just overflowed. It just overflowed. It would not accept that water. And I'm talking about a very slight belly. So that's not gonna function. Okay, so that's it, guys. Short and sweet.